In too many situations that we respond to, there are questions about why things unfolded the way they did in a situation, and we try to figure out why things lined up so wrong and led to a law enforcement officer's death. This situation is just the opposite. Things lined up the right way in a very bad situation, and with the slightest changes to the events, Corporal Aiken simply would not be here today. It's only because of the actions of Sergeant Jake Viano, Canine Taco, and the life-saving measures of his fellow deputies, Pinellas County EMS, and the medical staff at Bayfront Health St. Petersburg that Corporal Aiken survived. I'm going to summarize the events. I'm going to play the video, and then we'll bring in Corporal Aiken and Sergeant Viano, as I said, to answer any questions that you have. So here's what happened. On March 12th, 2023, at about 6:50 p.m., deputies were dispatched to a vehicle burglary call at 6371 60th Avenue North in the Lellman area of unincorporated St. Petersburg. A citizen reported seeing Bostic break into cars in the area. Bostic was carrying a backpack and he was wearing gloves. A citizen followed Bostic to the Grace Brethren Church, located at 6300 62nd Avenue North. The citizen saw a deputy in the church parking lot. That deputy had responded to the burglary call, and the citizen identified Bostic as the suspect in the burglaries. The deputy saw Bostic jump a fence near the residence at the rear of the church, so deputies established a perimeter and called for K-9. Corporal Aiken and his K-9 partner Taco are the ones that responded at the request for K-9. Sergeant Viano is a patrol sergeant, and he was working in an area that is north of where this was occurring. And Sergeant Viano is a former K-9 deputy. This is where, for those unexplainable reasons, and they truly are unexplainable in the right way in this case, that things lined up right as opposed to wrong and led to Corporal Aiken's life being saved. Sergeant Viano heard what was occurring on the radio, contacted Corporal Aiken, and decided to leave his assigned area and head to where Corporal Aiken was going to begin the Canine Track. Upon arrival, Corporal Aiken was getting ready to begin the track, and Sergeant Viano decided to run the track with him. Most times, Canine handlers run tracks without another deputy being with them. As they began the track and watching it, it was what you would call a good track. It was solid. They were on it the whole way. And it led them to a fence around the backyard of a residence at 6385 60th Avenue North. In this area of all where this occurred is depicted in the map on my left to your right, and you can see where the Canine Track began and where it ended. As you'll see in the video momentarily, when Corporal Aiken and Canine Taco arrived at the fence, Taco was alerting to the backyard of the fenced residence, and they had to go over the fence. They were followed over the fence by Sergeant Viano. As Corporal Aiken and Taco moved through the backyard, Corporal Aiken saw Bostic appear from around the corner of the house, and Corporal Aiken immediately identified himself and gave Bostic commands to show his hands. Instead of complying with those commands, Bostic moved back out of sight, concealed by the house, and waited with his gun out to ambush and shoot Corporal Aiken as he moved west along the side of the house. Again, this is where things lined up for the good guys in some good and unexplainable way, because there was a slight delay in Sergeant Viano going over the fence. That slight delay put just enough distance between Corporal Aiken and Sergeant Viano that when Bostic shot Corporal Aiken and then fired on Sergeant Viano, that Sergeant Viano had enough reaction time to hit the ground, get up, allow Canine Taco to bite Bostic, and then shoot and kill Bostic. If Sergeant Viano had been tight with Corporal Aiken, Bostic likely would have ambushed, shot, and incapacitated both of them instead of just ambushing, shooting, and incapacitating Corporal Aiken. It's also highly probable that if Sergeant Viano had not been with Corporal Aiken on the track, that once he was shot and incapacitated, and Corporal Aiken was laying on the ground, not breathing, that Bostic would have shot Corporal Aiken additional times. Because of Sergeant Viano's presence, Bostic was forced to turn his attention to Sergeant Viano, and then he fired on Sergeant Viano as opposed to firing additional rounds into Corporal Aiken. Another significant factor and hero in saving Corporal Aiken's life and allowing Sergeant Viano to avoid being shot is Canine Taco. Canine handlers train a lot with their dogs for the gunshot scenario, but one never really knows how the canine is going to react in the real situation. Here, Canine Taco reacted exactly as he was trained, and upon Corporal Aiken being shot, Canine Taco immediately engaged Bostic. Bostic, at 23 years old, had been arrested 18 times on 34 felonies and 22 misdemeanors. He had failed to appear in court the week before the shooting, where he was due to be sentenced to a 5-year minimum mandatory on another burglary charge. Bostic had told family members he was never going back to state prison, and at 23 years old, he had already served 2 stints in state prison, one beginning when he was 17 years old. At the time of the shooting, Bostic had active warrants outstanding for his arrest for burglary and other felonies. Bostic had 2 guns on him, one semi-automatic 9mm, which is the gun he used to shoot Corporal Aiken, and a .380 caliber semi-automatic in his pocket. Both guns were loaded, and Bostic had 126 rounds of additional ammunition in his backpack for both guns. Both guns had been previously stolen in car burglaries, one in Manatee County and one in Marion County. As the video will show, Corporal Aiken immediately fell to the ground after being shot. We have blurred him out while he's lying on the ground in the video, as you'll see here in a second. Corporal Aiken was shot 3 times, once in the leg, once in the wrist, and the most serious shot was to his neck. Bostic shot at Sergeant Viano 3 times, and Sergeant Viano returned fire 5 times, killing Bostic.